Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We are going to peel back the deep academic layers of Neil Gaiman's American Gods. We'll be looking at how shifting texts and divine characters actually personify America's deepest fears and anxieties. We're moving way past the surface-level fantasy plot today and getting right into the structural heart of the novel.
So, you gotta ask yourself, how exactly does a story about an ex-convict on a road trip reveal the underlying traumas of an entire nation? It sounds like a stretch, right? But as we're gonna see, this story is far more than just a simple quest. It's actually a profound exploration of multiplicity versus coherence, and it challenges the very idea of what it means to be American.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1, the 10th anniversary text. Before we can even touch the narrative, we really have to talk about the physical book itself. There was this fascinating thread on a sci-fi and fantasy forum that pointed out a stark contrast between the original 2001 release and the 10th anniversary edition. Turns out, Gaiman restored roughly 12,000 words of deleted scenes. Now, a lot of that was just cosmetic, tweaking internal dialogue, things like that, but there was one major, game-changing restoration that fundamentally alters how we read the mythology of this entire world.
That major addition? An 800-word appendix where our protagonist, Shadow Moon, literally sits down and has a chat with Jesus. Yeah, Jesus is just hanging out in the appendix. Now, this apocryphal scene isn't just some fun little Easter egg for the die-hard fans. It's actually our absolute hook into the novel's core philosophy. See, in this scene, Jesus explains that being a god means you basically become a meme. You're 1,000 different aspects of whatever people need you to be. It brilliantly establishes that the deities in this universe have these totally unstable, shifting identities that completely depend on human context.
Moving right along to part 2, a postmodern epic. Gaiman isn't just writing a fantasy novel here. He's literally hacking the oldest form of storytelling we have. To get how he does this, we have to look at literary theorist Mikhail Bakhtin. Bakhtin outlined 3 foundational pillars of an epic: the national past, the national tradition, and the epic storyteller. Normally, you'd rely on these 3 pillars to create a rock-solid, unified vision of a community. Think of Homer or Virgil, right? They use these elements to organize their worlds and give their people a definitive, proud history. But Gaiman? He takes those traditional rules and absolutely shatters them. As the character Mr. Ibis tells us so perfectly, American history is fictional, a charcoal sketch simplicity. Gaiman uses the epic format, sure, but instead of building a singular, unified narrative of the past, he exposes the American past for what it is, a curated, fragmented fiction.
Just contrast the traditional with the postmodern for a second. While ancient heroes like Aeneas built these unified, fated empires with super clear moral directions, our modern hero, Shadow Moon, is wandering through a messy, destabilized, multivocal world. In this postmodern epic, there is no single truth to uncover. There's no grand empire to build. There's literally only a fragmented America.
To pull off a trick like this, Gaiman becomes what we call an author brickler. A brickler is essentially a literary scavenger, someone who builds something brand new from a chaotic pile of available parts. Gaiman plays with all these existing American traditions. He adopts wildly varying fragments like Johnny Appleseed, bizarre roadside attractions, dusty historical texts, and weaves the whole shebang together. He takes the chaotic noise of American culture and rearranges it into a totally new mythology.
Which brings us right into part 3, rewriting the national past.
To truly wrap our heads around this fragmented mythology, we have to look at the literal histories of how these divine beings arrived in the States. The timeline is wild. You've got a mammoth god way back in 14,000 BC, Viking raiders bringing Odin over in 813 AD, and an enslaved African girl bringing the god Elegba in 1778. By slamming these marginalized narratives right up against the standard textbook history of America, Gaiman proves, without a doubt, that there is no single American history. It's this massive, multivocal tapestry of immigration, survival, and displacement.
But here is the kicker. What actually happens to that spirituality once it puts down roots here? Well, Gaiman shows us that Americans redirect their spiritual energy. Instead of building grand cathedrals or massive stone circles, the sacred just gets commercialized. All that power gets pumped into the world's biggest carousel or some giant roadside bat house. You know that weird, hollow feeling you get after visiting a massive tourist trap? That exact feeling is what Gaiman is tapping into. It's Americans wandering through these traps feeling superficially entertained but profoundly empty on a spiritual level.
Let's dig even deeper into that psychology. In part 4,
Gods as American anxieties.
So why do these specific gods exist in the specific ways that they do? It all comes down to this really cool literary term, prosopopeia. It's a rhetorical device where abstract ideas, or deep repressed fears, are given a literal physical body. In this universe, the gods aren't just magical characters casting spells. They are living, breathing instances of prosopopeia. They are walking, talking vessels for America's unvoiced cultural traumas.
We see this dynamic play out perfectly in the central conflict, the old gods versus the new gods. You have the old gods representing marginalized pasts and immigrant traditions that are just desperately clinging to survival. On the flip side, the new gods, like media and technical boy, represent globalization and rampant consumerism. But the real secret here, that chaotic, flashing overstimulation of the new gods is just a mask. It acts as a frantic cover-up for the sheer emptiness and anxiety of modern American life.
And poor Shadow Moon is caught right in the middle of this absolute mess. Think about the constant coin imagery throughout the story. Heads and tails, life and death, cheap coin tricks versus actual magic. Just like a sleight of hand trick, the grand apocalyptic war between the old and new gods is ultimately revealed to be an illusion. It's a massive con job, totally manipulated by Mr. Wednesday and Loki just to hoard power from the chaos.
To finally see through this massive lie, Shadow has to undergo what's called a catabasis. This is a classic epic trope where the hero literally has to descend into the underworld to gain profound truth. Shadow experiences this literal catabasis by hanging on the world tree for 9 days. By crossing that ultimate boundary between life and death, he becomes the mediator. He finally sees that the entire binary conflict of old versus new is a completely false construct designed to manipulate everyone.
Which brings us to our final revelation. Part 5. The Illusion of Identity.
Okay, let's pull all these narrative, historical, and psychological threads together. The ultimate, terrifying realization of this entire story is that the excessive consumerism of the new gods, and even the old ways of the old gods, are hiding a massive secret. They are covering up the fact that a unified, coherent American identity, well, it might just be a complete fiction. There's no core identity there. It's just hundreds of disparate pieces loosely held together by territory, politics, and fast food.
And that takes us right back to that wild scene from the 10th anniversary appendix. Nothing is fixed, nothing is stable. That is the ultimate postmodern truth right there. The symbols, the histories, and even the divine beings themselves, they are just continuously rewritten based on whatever the public desperately needs them to be at any given moment. So, I'm going to leave you with this one to chew on. If our gods, our histories, and our traditions are really just shifting fictions tailored to soothe our immediate anxieties, did a cohesive American identity ever actually exist to begin with? It's a heavy thought, for sure, but it's the ultimate anxiety beating at the very heart of this postmodern masterpiece. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the narratives around you.